How's it going tonight, everybody? Well, thanks for coming. I was worried to see what kind of turnout we might have because I didn't realize it was a Packer game tonight. So nobody leave in case you didn't realize the Packers were playing tonight. Being from Pittsburgh, of course, I'm a Steelers fan, so it didn't register with me. So, but also, I guess it's opening. I think tomorrow is the beginning of Deer, something like that, Saturday. So, as always, you guys don't disappoint. It's awesome to see everybody. Anybody here for the first time tonight? First time? Awesome. There's some new faces out there. I thought hot air ballooning looked really majestic. I always thought it was really cool. And I had mentioned once that, boy, I'd like to try that. And Mike, who's our speaker tonight, said, yeah, you ought to come out and fly with us. It'd be really cool. Got a chance to experience what it's like to be a crew member on the ground. Not as easy as I thought. And I'm sure he'll tell some stories. I know he has some video about that tonight. But I think we have a great ambassador of what it's like to fly lighter than air, and that is Mike Beck. He's an EA member, home-built aircraft builder as well. And I think you guys are going to be in good hands tonight. Mike, come on up and join us on stage.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome. It's your airplane.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I know the weather isn't the greatest, and like you said, the Packers are playing, so that's always a challenge. But I appreciate everyone coming out to learn a little bit about hot air ballooning tonight. So a little bit about me. Back in 1989, when I was 9 years old, it was AirVenture time. My dad took us out along the fence, the airport fence, next to the old Steve Whitman hangar on 20th Ave. What was there that year was the SR-71. That SR-71 came flying, screaming over our heads, low altitude, high speed, full afterburner, shaking the ground below us. Ever since that time, I've been addicted to everything that flies. So I actually went on and started working in different aviation jobs, worked line service, worked for actually a kit aircraft manufacturer, and currently my full-time gig is an avionics installer, installing avionics in business jets. So I actually got my private pilot's license in 2004 and ended up building Sonics from plans as I felt it was an economical and fun way to get into aviation. It turns out that Sonics actually helped me get into ballooning as I was flying one night, a nice evening, thinking about what I was going to get my wife, Brenda, who's here, for anniversary. And it was, I'm a kind of person who likes goofy numbers, and it was our 17th wedding anniversary on June 17th of 2017. So I'm like, I got to do something cool. So what I did is I was out flying my Sonics, saw a hot air balloon out over Rush Lake and said, oh, she always wanted to go on a hot air balloon ride. So we scheduled it with a friend of mine. She was a crew member and a fellow fixed-wing pilot. So scheduled with the person she crewed for. After a few weather delays, we went up for a flight. And even though my wife does not like flying in airplanes as much as I do, she fell in love with ballooning, as did I. On the ride home, she actually said to me, hey, we should buy one of those things. And that was a mistake, because she should have never told me that, because that night I was on Google looking up hot air balloons for sale. And sure enough, I found our current balloon out in Michigan and bought it, sight unseen, never touched a hot air balloon before, but we bought it. I ended up going down to Utah to a Part 141 balloon school, spent 2 weeks down there getting my commercial lighter than air rating, and then came back up here and started our business, Calm Sky Adventures. For the future, of course, I want to keep growing and expanding our business, but I also do plan on building a chariot-style balloon, and we'll kind of get into what a chariot-style balloon is shortly here. We'll go into a little bit of ballooning history. So back in France, there was two brothers, the Montgolfier brothers. In 1782, they were sitting by their fireplace watching the smoke rise. They figured that smoke was magic. Of course, today we know it's the heat that rises and not the smoke. They figured that if they could somehow contain that smoke, they could fly. And they actually were thinking ahead to using this new technology for military use. So they figured that it would give military advantage to whatever governments would buy it and use it. So what they did is they built a balloon. They were part of the paper industry at the time, so they built it out of paper and some silk and did a successful test flight unmanned. It lasted about 7 minutes and roughly just over a mile before it came crashing down into the French countryside. So after that, they decided it was time to send something living on board to test out if people could actually fly. The French government decided, we'll give you a couple prisoners to send up as test subjects, but the Montgolfier brothers actually said, no, we don't want some prisoners to actually be the first people to fly. We don't want that in the history books that they're prisoners. So what did they do? They sent up a duck, a rooster, and a sheep. So the reason was the duck is a bird that flies at high altitude. So if something happened to the duck, they knew that it would have been caused by the balloon. They sent up the rooster because it's a bird but doesn't fly at high altitude. So they knew if something happened to the rooster, it would have been caused by the altitude. And the sheep is what they felt was more human-like than the duck and the rooster. So that flight went up, and it lasted about 8 minutes before the balloon actually tore, came crashing down in the woods out in the French countryside. And the physician who was in charge of actually retrieving the animals got to the animals and found that the rooster was okay, the sheep was okay, but the duck broke its bill. It was noted as the first quack up in aviation history. So if you guys do decide to get into ballooning, one thing you're going to have to get used to is silly jokes and a lot of storytelling, because every balloonist does it. So in all honesty, the duck was actually okay, and all three were hailed as heroes of the air, and King Louis actually allowed them to live out the rest of their lives with him and on his property. So then it came time for the first humans to fly, and that actually took place just a few days from now's anniversary, November 21st, 1783. That flight went up to about 3,000 feet, lasted 25 minutes, and went up roughly about 5.5 miles. However, at that time, they didn't have the nice propane systems like we do now. They would actually take straw and wool, light it on fire, and that's how they get their heat. As you can imagine with a paper balloon, that's not the best idea maybe, and their balloon caught fire and they had to land early. They felt that if they didn't catch fire, they probably could have flew on for 3 times as long. All these first events were just really cool. No one had ever seen anything like it, and they drew tens of thousands of people to come watch these. Even, like I said, King Louis XVI, his royal family, and dignitaries from all over the world would come in and watch us. People even like Ben Franklin traveled to France just to see these balloons fly. Then in roughly 1793, ballooning made it over to the United States. By this time, we had gotten away from hot air and towards gas balloons. The first flight was actually out of Pennsylvania, and George Washington was actually in attendance to see that. Never quite was as popular as it was in Europe and France, where this all started. But it was growing. And by 1859, the U.S. Postal Service actually decided maybe we can use balloons for delivering mail. If any of you have any kind of idea about balloons, it's maybe not the best idea for trying to make a scheduled mail delivery. And that's the way it turned out. A man by the name of John Wise was supposed to fly from Lafayette, Indiana to New York City with a satchel full of mail. He flew about 5 hours, only going 30 miles, and ended up crashing in a woods, scattering the mail amongst the trees, and the Postal Service decided, yeah, maybe that's not the best idea. There was a couple other really unique facts about ballooning back in that time. Back in 1861, the Civil War was ramping up, and the Union Army actually started a balloon corps. Again, they're using gas balloons, and these balloons were tethered, and what they would do is they would fill them with hydrogen, send them up to the top of their tether, and the balloon crews would be able to see the enemy movements and relay those movements to the commanders on the ground using signal flags and even telegraph machines. It was kind of a game changer because it was the first reconnaissance of using aircraft. So the problem with that is that the balloons were stationary on the ground. Someone from the Union Army decided that they could get better use out of it if they had it on an aircraft carrier. So they actually took an old coal barge and converted it into the first aircraft carrier. The Confederate Army, they would see these balloons and also decide, hey, maybe we can use this to our advantage as well. Their program wasn't quite as organized as the Union Balloon Corps. However, one fun story that came out is there was a battle brewing. Both sides knew that the other side was close, but there was a real thick woods between them, and they didn't realize how close they were, so they sent up their balloons, and lo and behold, they're only mere yards from each other. And seeing the opposing side's balloons, each side loaded their muskets and started firing upon each other. The record has it that no one was hurt and the balloons were okay, but it's actually the first on-record aerial combat to take place. I tried to talk Chris earlier today into getting a balloon in the Eagle hangar with the rest of the warbirds. We'll see how that goes though. So gas balloons, they're very difficult to use, set up, and they take a lot of work. So as airships and now fixed-wing aircraft were taking the scene, ballooning really lost its popularity. However, in 1955, so we're jumping ahead quite a ways here, where there was a kind of a lull in ballooning. But in 1955, a man by Ed Yost actually was contracted by the US Navy to develop a balloon. This first balloon that he developed was actually kerosene powered, and he kept refining the idea until 1960 when he developed the propane burner, and it's really the grandfather of our modern hot air balloons. People like Ed Yost and also others, like Tracy Barnes, who was just a great inventor with ballooning technology. And it seems kind of funny to say technology, because when you think of technology in flight, you think of glass cockpits and stuff, but it really was, it was technology at that time. They really brought ballooning to a point where it could be used on a recreational level. It was now not a major chore to set up this balloon. It was actually fairly easy, and therefore more recreational pilots were buying balloons for fun, and it took the lead over the gas balloons. So we'll go through a little bit of the types of balloons and their components. So basically, what makes up a balloon? They're very simple machines, but often misunderstood. So we have your classic round balloon. If you see a balloon when you're out driving around or you go to an event, most of the time it's going to be a round balloon. They're more docile than some other style balloons, so they make a good platform for just everyday flying, training, and even for passenger flights. They can be small, from little one-size hoppers all the way up to gigantic 30-person basket, just gigantic ride balloons. There's many different features among different manufacturers, and even within their own manufacturers, there's different basket shapes and sizes. Some have turning vents, which allow the balloon to rotate, and just countless other features on some of these balloons. Then we have racer styles. These are an oblong shape. They look like an egg. They really allow for pilots to make faster climbs and descents. This allows them to cut through different wind shears at a faster rate, which normally they're used by competition pilots. And balloon competitions, what they do is they'll set out a marker. The balloons will launch from roughly a mile away and try to steer to that marker and drop a beanbag on it. And sometimes there's big money, like tens of thousands of dollars on the line for these competitions. So these competition pilots want to be able to fly towards that marker, drop through the wind shears without getting blown off course like the round balloons might. Then we have the special shapes, which are always fun. These are normally experimental balloons. They're always custom made to look like a character or an object. They present very unique and challenging flight characteristics just because of their sheer size, and because, like you can see, like Yoda and the bee, they have all these appendages hanging off them which can catch different wind shears and do goofy things with them. So they're a little bit more difficult. They can be more difficult to fly. However, they are often the main attraction at events, especially at balloon golos. One little thing I want to point out here, this on the bottom right here. So the mouse here, that's named Cheesy. That's actually a home-built balloon right up the road here in Menasha. It was built by my friend Nathan and his wife Jessica. Actually, right now, it is down in Leon, Mexico, at an event down there, and then it's going to Chile, and then going to Taiwan. So it's a world-traveling mouse. I actually, myself and other local balloonists got to help cut some of the panels for it and help build it. And I actually was on the maiden voyage of it and a couple other test flights. So then we have hoppers and chariots. These have no basket. Generally, they're experimental, and they're actually really, really common in the home-built balloon community. And yes, there is a home-built balloon community. They actually have their own organization, the EBAA, which has a meet out in Vermont every year where people take their experimental balloons and get together and show what they made over the last year. So hoppers, as you can see in the top left there, that's actually my friend Nathan and his hopper. It's literally a chair strapped to a propane tank with a burner and envelope over your head. So you're literally just strapped there with your legs dangling below you. And then they have chariots, which are generally a two-person balloon. Some are very similar to that hopper with just a wider bench for two people. Or some are very fancy, complicated contraptions like the one in other pictures that was built by my friend Pete. He's also the balloon repairman in the state of Wisconsin, so anytime we damage something or we need an inspection, he's the one who does it. But he let me fly that chariot with him this last summer. And I'll tell you what, all my time has been in balloons with baskets, and literally just sitting in a chair floating 1,000 feet over the ground is pretty unique. It's fun, but it's pretty unique. So what makes up a balloon? We have the envelope. That's going to be nylon or polyester. It's made of ripstop fabric. And they can range anywhere from 25,000 cubic feet, which would be like a hopper size, all the way up to 500,000 cubic feet for the large ride balloons. There's such a difference there. People have actually flown their small hoppers inside of the large ride balloons. Then we have on the very top, we have what's called the parachute or the vent. Basically what that does is it's attached to a rope that comes down the basket, and we can vent hot air out. So if we're flying and we need to descend a little faster, we'll pull that rope, and it will actually allow us to vent the heat out the top and descend faster. It's also how we deflate the balloon when we land. Then we have the basket, also called the carriage or the gondola, and really that's what carries the people and the fuel tanks and any other items that we might carry as payload. Generally, baskets are made out of wicker. They have tried other materials such as aluminum, carbon fiber. However, they really find that wicker is strong enough, but yet flexible enough and light enough to allow us to make sometimes adventurous landings, as we have in ballooning. So wicker has just kind of stuck around for many, many years. And the nice thing about wicker too is if something does happen to it, it's fairly easy to repair. As for the fuel system, it's a propane-fired system. We normally carry it in tanks, which are made out of aluminum or more recently stainless steel, generally 10, 15, or 20-gallon tanks. And it can be anywhere from one tank on a hopper all the way to 6 or more tanks on a large ride balloon. For instrumentation, balloons again, very minimal instrumentation. We have an altimeter, vertical speed indicator, and an envelope temperature gauge. That envelope temperature is actually what our limitations are mostly in flight. We don't want to exceed the manufacturer's recommended temperature. Some are 250, some are 275, some are 300 degrees Fahrenheit. As you get hotter temperatures in the balloon, the fabric actually deteriorates and can fail faster. So that's why we have to watch our temperatures. As you can see on the bottom left here, that's kind of like the old brown 6-pack gauges. However, a lot of us are moving to a new multifunction type display. which these are really nice. This is actually a picture of my Digitool. It tells us the altitude, the vertical speed, envelope temperature, and also tells us GPS data such as our speed over the ground, our actual course of direction, and it flight logs everything for us so we can actually upload it into Google Earth and see a flight path of our current or of our past flights. So how do these things work? One of the most prevalent questions I get is, how do you steer these things? Well, that's a whole story in itself. So we'll just go through what basically a typical flight looks like in a balloon. So as we start, if there's any pilots out there, as you know, normally before your flight, you call flight service, get a briefing, and get the winds aloft. Well, the winds aloft at a standard briefing are at intervals of 3,000 feet. Half the time, we're not even flying at 3,000 feet or above. So we need more micro-level winds. So we're using other forecasting methods, and one of the more prevalent methods we use is called a Ruck cycle, and that's this over here. So this forecast at the ground actually shows us it's 6 miles an hour. However, if you look here at 1,400 feet, it's actually 48 miles an hour. So that's quite a difference. If you also look at the temperature here, 51 degrees on the ground, 63 degrees up at 1,400 feet. That's what we call temperature inversion. That means that the ground is cooler than the air mass above it. Now, what that means for ballooning is that temperature increase, that inversion, will actually hold these stronger winds aloft. However, as that ground heats up, as the sun comes up, that's going to go away. That temperature is going to rise on the ground, and we're going to lose that inversion, and it's going to cause those strong winds to mix down to the surface, causing gusty wind conditions, which isn't the most favorable thing for landing a balloon in. Then we also use VAD winds. These are radar-derived winds from the National Weather Service. So these are in 1,000-foot increments, and this is actually from the same day as this forecast was. And down here you can see each of these marks is 10 miles an hour, so the winds at 1,000 feet were 40 miles an hour up to 50 miles an hour at 3,000 feet. But then an interesting thing occurs. Above 5,000 feet, the winds actually go calm. That indicates that there's a low-level jet, which is not a great thing for ballooning, as it can actually push in the side of the balloons and cause it to deflate, which we don't really want. So this was actually a day that I canceled a flight with a customer, and the customer was on the ground looking at this. It was 6 miles an hour, even less. And they're like, hey, the leaves aren't even rustling on the trees. Why are we canceling? But like I said, that 50-mile-an-hour winds almost at 1,400 feet, it was going to mix down and create some really gusty conditions, and it would be a little bit more adventure than I think they were paying for. So even with all this data, as all of you know, forecasts aren't always accurate. I mean, I know that's a shock to some people, but they're really not always accurate. And even this radar data, there's only 3 stations in the state, one in Green Bay, one in Milwaukee, and one in La Crosse. There's a lot of area between that. So how do we tell our actual local winds aloft? We use what's called a pie ball. So this is me watching this pie ball right there. It's just a helium balloon we send up. As that balloon climbs, we know it climbs at roughly 300 feet per minute, so we time it. As that balloon changes direction, we note the time and we can calculate how high it was and at what altitude we're going to get a change in direction. Not the most accurate place, but it's been what's used forever, and it's kind of a tradition and people still use it. However, some of us now are moving on to drone winds. So how this works is we take a drone and we send it straight up vertically and then flap to 400 feet or 1,500 feet if I have a waiver for that particular area, and we come straight back down. As that drone is trying to maintain its pinpoint location from where it took off, it's compensating for any winds, and as we land, it will compute those into calculations, which then show up as this nice handy chart showing us actual direction and wind speed. So it's way more accurate than the pie ball method, and it's kind of nice because we're not releasing latex balloons into the environment. So after we get all that stuff figured out, we'll go out to our launch site and we'll start unpacking the balloon. People often ask me, where do you store a hot air balloon? These things are huge. Well, actually, that bag fits a whole 77,000 cubic foot balloon envelope. It's pretty amazing that it actually packs down to that small a size. And actually, my whole system packs down and fits into a 6x10 enclosed trailer with room to spare. So once we get the envelope all dragged out and unpacked, we use a large fan to fill it with cold air. And at the top of the balloon where that valve is, I explained before, we tab that in with Velcro. The Velcro holds it in place while we're inflating it with cold air. However, once we throw heat in it, we actually pull the rope and unseat the Velcro, as the hot air will actually hold that valve in place. And that allows us, if we need to quickly vent air or quickly deflate, to do so without fighting that Velcro. Once we get it all cold packed, roughly 70 to 80% full with that fan, we're going to light the fires and heat it up. We throw in the heat from the burner, and as we know, hot air expands, so it expands the balloon full, and eventually it gets less dense and causes the balloon to rise and stand up. This is a real quick video just showing what a pilot's point of view looks like for the cold inflation and going hot and standing the balloon up. You can see it gets a little gusty here, making our crew work for their money. So you can see how fast that actually, once we start adding heat, how fast we can get that balloon to stand up. That's because those burners are actually putting out about 19 million BTUs of heat. So once we get it all stood up and ready to go, we're going to do some last minute pre-flight, and we're going to go on our flight. We're going to fly high, fly low, and wave and talk with the people below. And that's true. We'll actually fly over people, and they'll be out in their yard waving to us, talking with us, and it's something really unique to ballooning that you don't get with other forms of aviation. We're going to manage our fuel and use winds to steer to make sure that we don't run out of fuel over something like a large woods or a marsh, or even better, a lake, as I don't think my crew would be very happy retrieving the balloon out of a lake. Then we're going to land safely, preferably somewhere where the crew can easily retrieve us, and hopefully not needing to go through electric fences and battle cattle. Now, this is a true story. Up in Wausau, a couple years ago, at the Taste and Go Balloon event, I took my mom and daughter for a wonderful flight, and normally we try to avoid landing near livestock because we don't want to spook them. I don't feel like buying a broken horse or chasing cows down a country road. However, these cows were way over on the far side of this wood, multiple pastures over. So I didn't really worry about it. They were far enough away where they wouldn't spook, so I decided to land this nice pasture. Unbeknownst to me, the pasture was surrounded by electric fence. So my crew had to go and try to find a gate to actually get through that fence without zapping themselves. So it took them a little while to get there. In the meantime, we look over to our right, and we have these cows coming at us. Apparently, the pastures were all open, and the brown cow was the leader of the pack, brown Jersey cow who we named Josie the Jersey cow. And according to the farmer, she's always the one who leads that herd into mischief, and she definitely was here too. So while our crew was trying to get to us, the cows actually came up, right up to the basket, were snoofling us and slobbering all over the leather on the basket, which was kind of ironic. So my crew finally got out to us, and you can see my crew member Dave here was actually having to shoo the cows away pretty much the whole time because they just wanted to come up by the balloon. They never got further away than that, which is like 50 or 60 feet. They really wanted to check it out. We ended up floating the balloon to the farmer's yard because I really didn't want to deflate it in the pasture because those cows just would not leave us alone. I was really afraid they were going to trample all over our balloon, and I really didn't think that was cow hooves would be a good thing for balloon fabric, and I didn't feel like cleaning a bunch of cow slobber off it either. So we floated up to the farmer's yard and deflated it there. And as years have passed, we go up to that event again, and the farmer and his family actually come and seek us out and say hi and relive this story because they're actually sitting at their breakfast table watching this whole ordeal go on, just laughing hysterically at our fight with their cows. So yeah, those are the kind of adventures that you get with ballooning, and I pretty much guarantee you won't have that kind of stuff with other forms of aviation. So I said we use winds to steer, and winds can be fickle, especially on light and variable days. So this is a little video here. We were actually heading to the northwest here, had a nice path to land this beautiful, freshly cut hayfield that my crew had permission to drive out in from the farmer already to retrieve us. And as we drop down below the treetops, we got to turn to the right. Well, you can see what's out there isn't pretty, and we really didn't want to end up in that thicket and the marsh. So I saw this little tree here in front of us. So being a balloon pilot, which I don't recommend you do this with other forms of aircraft, but we bounced off that tree to prevent that right turn and bounce us back towards the field. I didn't bounce us hard enough, but at least prevented us from going into that field, and it ended up in a real nice soft landing actually in the cattails.
Into the tree?
And that's the vent line I'm pulling there to let some heat out.
What would you like us to do?
Kind of just back up a little. And there you can see I bounce off the tree.
This way.
Al, don't throw yourself over.
My passengers are leaning trying to get us into the hayfield.
Boy, that little Italian fan would really come in handy.
Right?
That's cool. That's cool. I just can't get over like the amount of like small tweaking.
I just cannot get enough left here. Yeah, it looks dry. I think.
And a real nice smooth balloon landing, which sometimes they're not that smooth. We'll get into that later.
How do you know that tree didn't have thorns in it?
I guess I would have found out eventually, huh? That's why I have a good repairman. So, as I had mentioned before, how do we steer these things? And we use winds to steer. So, ballooning is interesting. We can't steer like a normal aircraft. We don't have 3-axis control. So, we literally just have up and down. We use those different wind layers, as I showed you in that wind forecast, to steer. Now, this is, on the far left, was sent to me by my friend McKenna out in Seattle, Washington. This is a really great example of using winds to steer. So she took off down here at this green dot, and as she took off, she had this nice wind direction to the southwest. However, as she climbed, she got this wind direction, almost 180 degrees difference to the northeast. She played around a little bit, just having fun. When she got up here, she decided she wanted to get back to this landing field. So she dropped down, rode that southwesterly wind all the way back, but ended up a little west of where she wanted to land. So she popped back up into that northeast, headed up, got a little bit north and east of that field, because she knew as she dropped down she'd have that southwest again, and she contoured that right into that field yards away from where she took off. So that's how we can steer. Around here, it's very rare that we have days like that we can steer. This is more typical of a good day of steering around here. This was a flight I did not long ago. Took off here, and as you can see at low altitude as we took off, we had a southeast direction. However, as we climbed up over the city, we got more south. I kind of had a plan where I wanted to land. Down here was a field I've landed multiple times, and you can see how I used those winds to actually steer just by varying my altitude, and landed right in the corner of that field. Now, some days, the winds will just not cooperate at all. This last picture is that particular day. This was just 2 months ago. We sent up the pieballs I showed before, just out in Amarillo, and it went straight to the northwest. 20 minutes later, we had the balloon set up in Fisk, and we went straight to the southeast. So this is only about 1/10 of a mile we covered, and then right here, we literally stopped for about 20 minutes. I went down to treetop level, went up to about 3,000 feet, nothing, no wind change. We literally sat there. I thought it was kind of boring. My passengers were still having fun, so that's all that matters. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, wind picked up, and we went north. So you just never know what you're going to get with ballooning. So you know, that is really an adventure of it. Then after we land safely, we finish up with a post-flight celebration. This is a tradition that actually goes way back to those first flights in 1783. What would happen is, as I mentioned, they would use actual fire with straw and wool to create the heat. Well, as you can imagine, that's causing all this smoke to build all these balloons and fire, and partly because they didn't know what it was, partly superstition. The farmers back then thought it was sky demons falling out of the air into their land, and they'd run out with their pitchforks and stab it to death. And you can imagine repairing a balloon with 1,000 pitchfork holes in it back then, or even today, is not real fun. So what they would do is the balloon pilots would take a bottle of champagne with them. Being in France, I guess it makes sense, and they would land and offer the landowners this bottle of champagne, because apparently the French landowners knew that sky demons didn't drink champagne, so that they must be friendlies. But yeah, it's still a tradition we carry on today with our passengers and landowners. We do a toast and end up saying the balloonist prayer at the end, and I feel it's just a nice little touch to close out the flight with. So this next video is a quick, the middle part is time-lapse, just in the interest of time, but it's a flight with my wife, Brenda. She is a glutton for punishment when it comes to landings. Every landing she had from that first anniversary flight through pretty much every other landing has been a higher speed landing with lots of basket tipping and dragging and all that fun stuff. And you'll see as she comes in for landing, she's crouched down the bottom of the basket because she knows what's coming.
Then guys, the basket is, the radios are in the back in the red bag.
Taking up a little high, but not that bad.
on, push. Wait on, yep. Wait on, guys.
I saw that little oof at the end. So that's more of a typical Midwestern balloon landing. That's kind of in the middle of the pack of landings. They range from like that other one you saw to quite a bit, actually more crazy than this. So, but yeah, that's a typical balloon landing, especially when Brenda's on board the balloon. Now we're going to try to change gears here and talk about some events. There's a lot of local events, many small one-day or night balloon events, balloon glows. However, there's also some nice bigger full weekend events such as Seymour Burgers Fest and the Wausau Taste and Glow. Seymour has about 20 balloons and do night glows. It's always in early August, and Wausau is, I think it's the biggest event in the state. It's a really amazing event. We have 40 balloons up there. We do a night glow that's kind of synchronized to music. There's tons of a bunch of other stuff going on there as well. That's always right after the 4th of July. And I highly recommend if you have a chance to get up there and check that one out, because that's simply amazing. EAA AirVenture right here. During the Twilight Flight Fest, we do balloon glow along the taxiways on the nights that there's not a night air show. So definitely come and check that out as well. No matter where you are in the country, there's events all around. So even if you're not from the area, wherever you're by, you can find an event sometime within driving distance. And then of course, there's Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. That is the AirVenture of ballooning. I did throw this little graphic on here. I just thought it was funny. I found it on, I don't know, some ballooning forum or something. And it's basically the life of a balloon pilot and crew during these events. Eat balloon, drink, nap, eat balloon, eat, drink, sleep. So that's pretty true actually, so that's why I love it so much. So we'll talk a little bit about Albuquerque. So this year was the 50th anniversary of Albuquerque. It was actually mine and Brenda's first time out there. It was absolutely amazing. I actually went out as an additional pilot for my friend Sonia and flew her balloon out there, as I had limited vacation time left, so I couldn't go out there for the full week, but we were out there for a few days and just loved every second of it. It's always in early October, 9-day event. They also do have a really great live stream with great announcers that show all the mass ascensions, the balloon glows, the competitions, and they have a great YouTube channel that shows all the past episodes as well, so you can go back and check those out. By the numbers, this is just mind-boggling to me, and I've seen tons of pictures of it, but being out there in person, it's just unbelievable. It's indescribable. They had almost 650 balloons attending, 121 of the special shape balloons, almost 800 pilots, and then they had what they call zebras, their launch directors. They had 64 of those. So for 700 balloons, they had 64 people directing them when to launch and how to launch safely. And let me tell you, I was a little shocked at how well of an oiled machine that whole process was. You have hundreds of balloons on a field that's 3/4 of a mile long by 1/2 mile wide, and these launch directors are just getting everyone in the air without any kind of situations, and it was really quite shocking. They had 833,000 people over the 9 days, and that's pretty similar to AirVenture numbers, but as many of you know, the AirVenture grounds out here are just enormous. This, like I said, is an area that's 3/4 of a mile by 1/2 mile. They're packing 800,000 people in there, so the crowds were just amazing. One fun fact about this special shape balloon was out there this year, and a lot of us were trying to figure out what it was at first. From a distance, we couldn't really tell what it was, and there was a lot of discussion, some of it that I can't repeat at this presentation. But it's actually a screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver from a screwdriver manufacturer in Germany. And I guess it's pretty good advertising for them because people sure were talking about it, maybe not calling it a screwdriver, but definitely talking about it. One interesting thing about it is the basket's here and the shaft of the screwdriver actually hangs down below. During takeoff and landing, that's actually rolled up and brought into the basket, and as they're flying, they unfurl it and have a fan that blows air into it to keep that inflated. So yeah, there was a lot of discussion on that one. It's pretty funny. So why ballooning? It's pure aviating. It really is seat of the pants flying, minimal instruments. It's a lot of feel, a lot of experience goes into it. You're feeling it in the balls of your feet, what your balloon is doing. And no two flights are ever the same. People always ask, where are we going to land? And I never really know, so the only honest answer I can tell them is on the ground, and I haven't missed yet. So, what's really cool about it is it's really kind of magical, it's whimsical, and really brings joy to people of all ages. We'll literally have caravans of cars following us as we're flying, taking pictures, jumping out and waving to us. When we land, we'll have them come up and actually help us pack up and bring the kids out and take pictures in the baskets. Stuff like, just like that is just really cool to see the joy it brings to people's face. When a balloon flies over, it draws a crowd. When an airplane flies over, not so much unless you're an aviation nerd like me and pull up on your smartwatch what flight it is or whatever. But balloons really draw a lot of attention. That's really cool. Unless you screw up, then it's not cool. It's really true low and slow flying. We can talk with people as we fly over. We hear and smell what's going on around us. You don't get that in an airplane so much. For instance, I took Chris up not that long ago, a couple weeks ago on a flight, and we literally flew over some people having a bonfire in their backyard. We could hear them laughing. We could smell the smoke from the fire. It's just really kind of magical, and it's nice because you fly over, and some of the times, if it's the evening, the people will be like, oh, hey, come land in our yard. We got a cold beer for you. And some of us have actually been able to do that a couple times, so that's kind of fun. You get to hear and see wildlife like no other forms of aviation. You can actually see deer or hear them running through cattails as you fly 10 feet over them. We'll fly over a marsh and you'll hear the ducks quacking and hear their wings actually hitting the water as they take off. And then our crew and other pilots are like a big family. These events are really like reunions to us. We do a lot of tailgating, have a lot of good food, and tell a lot of stories. And then one of the things about a balloon ride business is the people that we meet doing it. We do a lot of special occasion flights, whether it's engagements, weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, anything like that. On the flip side of that, we also do some more pull at the heartstrings type flights, like bucket list flights for people who are terminally ill and they want to go on a last hurrah on a balloon ride. Those are always a little bit, like I said, tugging at the heartstrings type things, but I'm glad we're able to do that for these people. And then we have some flights that just have like a real deep meaning to them. One that sticks out to me and is one of my favorite flights ever. We had a couple who went up for a ride, and they had a gift certificate. No big deal. A lot of people have gift certificates. And normally when we're flying, I have them turn around to grab a selfie with the passengers and myself as we're flying. So I have them turn around, and the lady is just bawling her eyes out. And I was worried that she was having an anxiety attack or she's afraid of heights or something like that. So I was, talking to her, trying to find out what's wrong, and she says, no, these are tears of joy. I'm like, okay. And it turns out that their church gave them a gift certificate because their young son had recently passed away, and the church felt that by giving them a balloon ride, they'd be able to see what their son saw from heaven. Well, holy cow. I tell you, the pollen in the air that day was really bad because my eyes were watering. And so we landed on a country road with no power lines, and I told my crew, and that pollen must have gotten the balloon because then all my crew had watery eyes too. It was pretty cool. But right where we landed, it was right alongside a ditch, and it was all grass, except for one little flower right next to the basket where we landed, and that flower was their son's favorite color. So stuff like that is just, it just really hits home and, really makes you appreciate what you're doing for people with this stuff. Then we get on to fun stuff. This was a real fun engagement. This couple was a blast to fly with. So they went up for a flight. He had planned on proposing to her, and he made up this banner. It's like 20 foot by 40 foot. I'm like, holy cow, that's huge. He's like, well, I want to make sure that she can see it as we fly over. I'm like, well, we're only flying over between 500 and 1,000 feet. They'll be able to see that thing from the space station. And I was honestly worried that someone would be flying over in an airliner and the lady would look out and think that someone was proposing to her and then there'd be hard feelings on the plane or something, I don't know. But she did see it and very enthusiastically said yes. Again, that I would have liked to share that video, but there was a lot of foul language and excitement coming out of her, so it was kind of fun. Fast forward to their wedding, and they actually hired us to have the balloon at their wedding. We were supposed to do tethered rides for all their wedding party. However, you can see the balloon is kind of at like a 45-degree angle here because it was really, really windy, and my crew was working to get that balloon even stood up. However, we were able to get some really cool wedding photos for them, so that was pretty exciting. So you're saying to yourself, Mike, this was an awesome presentation. I want to become part of the ballooning community and be a pilot. Well, kind of the unique thing about ballooning is it's a really small segment of aviation. Depending on whose numbers you use, there's roughly between 3,000 and 6,000 balloon pilots in the United States. And for the ladies out there who might want to get into aviation but think it's the boys club or whatever, there's actually a very large percentage of female balloon pilots, more so than other forms of aviation for sure. So you can be amongst other lady flyers at these events and stuff and feel more at home. It's a very economical way to get your pilot certificate because the requirements are a lot less than a lot of powered flight options. There's no medical needed for private pilots. This actually just changed yesterday. The FAA just sent out their final rule that now will require a second-class medical for commercial pilots. And you can train using Part 61 private instructors or go to a balloon school that's Part 141 like I did. Most of those balloon schools are in the southwestern United States just because they have such better weather down there for flying balloons, and you can really just go through and get your training done within a couple of weeks versus what would take months up here. The best way to gain experience is by crewing for local balloon pilots. You'll learn how to set up systems and take them down, and most pilots will trade crewing opportunities for flights. So that's a really good way to learn how to balloon and get in the air. So if you want to become a private pilot, you have to be 16. You have to pass a written exam or hold a private for any powered aircraft. You'll only need 10 hours of total time, 6 flights of dual, 2 must be over an hour. You have to do 1 solo flight and 1 flight to more than 2,000 feet. Then you'll take an oral and practical test with an examiner. And while you're training, you'll learn stuff like navigation, pre-flight operations, takeoffs, landings, and a large focus, of course, on emergency procedures. Now moving up to your commercial, you have to be 18. Again, you have to pass a written or hold a commercial for a powered aircraft. Like I said, this has changed. As of yesterday, you need a second-class medical. You need 35 hours of total time. 20 hours must be in balloons, 10 hours of dual, 2 flights of an hour within 60 days, and 2 solo flights and 1 more than 3,000 feet, and take your tests. You'll learn basically the same skills as you did on your private, but there'll be the more stringent standards, and you also learn performance maneuvers such as steep descents. One really interesting note is, unlike other forms of flying, there is no CFI or flight instructor certificate for balloons. So as a commercial pilot, you actually are the instructor. So then you will need to take fundamentals of instructing and actually develop a lesson plan and teach your student, which is your instructor, flight maneuver while in flight. So I have to give a special shout out to our crew and our awesome landowners who let us use their land for takeoffs and landings. Without all of them, this would not be possible. It can't happen by ourselves. So our crew is really great, especially on events. Like you saw on that graphic, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. We're often setting the balloon up 3 times in a day for a whole weekend, and they give up their time to come help us out. And then I got this is actually, we did a photo shoot with my friend Nicole, who's a professional photographer. She set up this amazing photo shoot with models and flowers and everything. And one of the shots we wanted to be out of the shot, So my crew member Ron and I were crouched down to the bottom of the basket for a while, and Nicole snuck up on us and took a picture of us in there. So that's kind of fun. And one thing we do find is that our crew likes to eat, so we try to feed them well as in addition to giving them flights and stuff. And this is our honorary crew cat, Jasper, and Al Dog, wearing their Calm Sky Adventures swag. Got to have those kind of crew members as well. So what we're going to do now is I have about a 12-minute slideshow that we'll play, and while that's playing, I will take any questions you guys have. After the slides are done, I have one other thing quick to finish up here, but then that'll be it. So we'll start the slideshow here playing. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. Yeah.
Weight restrictions, or how much weight can you take?
Yeah, so weight restrictions, we're limited to weight per the manufacturer's recommendations. However, a lot of it is based on the outside temperature. So the hotter it is outside, the less heat we have available to put into the actual balloon envelope, because we're restricted on how much heat we can have in the envelope. Generally, we're looking at roughly 120 degrees above the ambient air temp to get the balloon buoyant. So if it's 100 degrees out, just to get buoyant, we're already at 220 degrees inside the envelope, so we're climbing up there already. So normally what I like to do is I like to set a 500-pound limit for my 77,000 cubic foot balloon, and that pretty much covers anything that I'll fly in. I don't fly above 90 degrees temperature just because it's hard on the crew, and packing it up in 90+ degree heat isn't good. And I have actually had a passenger pass out on me because she thought it was a good idea not to eat or drink anything before the balloon so that she wouldn't have to use the restroom while in the balloon, and yeah, that wasn't a good situation. So yeah, it really depends on heat, but I set a 500-pound limit for my passengers. That's not including fuel and my weight, but yeah, I set a 500-pound capacity for carrying payload, basically.
Did you say that you made some of your own balloons?
I'm going to be building a Chariot style this winter. That's the plan anyway. I'm okay at sewing. Luckily, Nathan, who built the mouse, he's actually going to be the one who's going to be helping me do the sewing. He's built, I think, 5 or 6 balloons now, so he's really good at it, and he's going to help guide me through that process. But I'm really looking forward to that. It'll be a fun balloon, I think, just flying around with your feet dangling out below you. It'll be an experience for sure, though.
Are you going to record it so we can see how you did it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
In my first trip to Albuquerque, like you said, just speechless.
Yeah, pictures don't do just, so the pictures playing right now are actually Albuquerque. Yeah. And it's just amazing because you look everywhere you look when you're flying or even just staying on the ground. I was crewing a couple days out there. There's just balloons everywhere. Like no matter where you look, there's literally just balloons, and it is, yeah, it's really indescribable. It's almost overwhelming, and I definitely want to go back again because it was almost like a shock at the first time. So I definitely want to go out there when I know kind of what to expect and maybe even appreciate it more. So it's definitely something that I want to get back out and enjoy. Yes?
How does ground crew know where to achieve end of flight?
Okay, so that's interesting. So most people think, well, this is a huge balloon. They can just see the balloon and follow it. That's not always the case. We might dip down low in a valley and get behind some trees, and they might not be able to see us. So there's a couple different things we do. We have two-way radios, so we maintain contact with our crew via two-way radio. Also, we use some apps sometimes. There's a little thing called Glimpse, or we can even use like Google location sharing so they can actually see where we are on their phone. But yeah, it's amazing how a 70-foot tall balloon can actually hide. Like, you really wouldn't think it, but there's times where they're like, where are you? And I'm like, well, I'm in this hayfield right here. Well, we can't see you. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't see me? I'm 70 feet tall. So yeah, so like I said, it's kind of crazy how balloons can actually hide. But yeah, so we use two-way radios. Normally what we do is when I'm flying and I kind of pick out area where I think I want to land, and I say think because a lot of times I'll be on approach for it, nice approach, perfect angle into the field, and then last minute I'll get some crazy turn and my crew will be there all set up ready to catch us, and they're like, where are you going? But so normally they're there and we're in radio contact. They go and try to get the landowner's permission before we land there. Sometimes it's not always feasible, people aren't home or whatever, but yeah, so we try and maintain contact, and you know, like I said, we can use other apps as well with location sharing. Yeah. So we do, it's, especially for commercial, we have an annual inspection no matter what, similar to any certified aircraft, or a 100-hour inspection when we're doing commercial. Hard landing inspections, not so much unless you kind of break something. Balloon baskets are actually pretty robust. They can take quite a beating before damage happens to them, but normally if anything happens, it's going to be a rip in the fabric from bouncing off a pokey tree or something like that. But yeah, generally, probably one of the most common repairs is burn holes in fabric during inflations. As a balloon pilot, it's not if you're going to burn it, it's when you're going to burn it. And actually, up at WAS, that's actually my son learning to inflate there. Up at WAS, I had one of my crew members who wanted to learn to inflate the balloon, and as she was inflating it, the wind actually shifted completely 90 degrees from where we were laid out and blew the balloon back in towards us as she was on the burner, and it burned out one of the panels. I burned a hole in it, not very big, but it was a little bit noticeable. She felt terrible about it. And I was like, hey, it happens. And she's like, well, I burned a hole in your balloon. I said, you know, 2 months ago I burned 3 panels out. So, you know, it happens. But yeah, so we just take it for an annual inspection. They go through. We actually pull test the fabric, so they make sure that it can withstand 40 pounds of force without tearing. And then we actually go through panel by panel on the balloon and look for any holes and patch those if there is any. Go through the basket, the fuel system, pressure test the fuel system, and check the burner operation. Yes?
Duct tape?
Duct tape. No, actually, they are a certified aircraft, so we have to use actual FAA-approved methods and patches. So I buy a little sticky patch for small holes, and they're like $8 a piece just because they have to be FAA certified, when literally a piece of clear packing tape would probably do the same thing. Yes?
How come weather balloons can go so high and hot air balloons cannot go so high without them making a crash?
How can they go so high without crashing? Well, weather balloons are filled with gas. They're gas balloons. So they actually go high and then they actually explode. Hot air balloons, we don't want that to happen. So we don't go that high in balloons normally. We like to stay low. Ballooning's like, we like to get low into the treetops and pick leaves off the trees for our customers, or drag the basket across cattails. We like to dip into a pond and actually do what's called a splash and dash. So normally we stay pretty low. Every once in a while you'll get people. I just saw some people who flew over the Alps, the mountains, and I don't know, it's cold up there and you need oxygen, and that's not for me. I don't like the cold, so I like to fly down low where it's warm. Yes?
How long is your typical flight?
So our typical flight, we flight plan for an hour, kind of, you know, the average for general aviation, I guess. Now that can vary, depends on what we have for winds. A lot of times, like I said, we launch a pieball, and especially around this area, we have 3 very large bodies of water. So I base my launch site off of what direction that pieball goes, so I won't end up over a large body of water, low on fuel, and needing a boat to have my crew come out and get us. However, in that one picture I showed you, the wind was totally opposite. So we might launch and end up somewhere where we're heading towards a bad direction, and we might need to land early just to prevent from getting in a bad situation. It's, you know, like they always say, it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than be flying wishing you're on the ground. And that applies, you know, even when we're flying, if we have to take an early landing. It also is based on our fuel usage. As it's warmer out, we're heating the balloon more to provide that lift, so we're burning more fuel. Now when it gets colder like this, we don't have to add that much heat to the balloon to get that temperature up. So we can fly for 3+ hours on end. I think my longest flight I did was just under 3.5 hours. Granted, that was a bigger balloon, and it was only 2 people, and it was a cold day, so we were able to fly for a long time. The other thing that takes effect kind of going off of that is we only fly in the early mornings right around sunrise and in the late evenings right before sunset. The reason for that is we don't want thermal activities. If we start seeing like hawks and other kind of birds riding the thermals, we know it's not good because we don't want to be up there when thermals are developing. So that's why we fly early and late. So in the winter, we don't have as much thermal activity, so in morning flights, that gives us a little bit longer opportunity to fly as well than like during the summer. Anything else?
Do you have to have aircraft identification electronics on there?
So, no. And that's kind of an interesting story. Chris and I were actually just discussing this earlier. So balloons are interesting as the N-numbered part of the balloon is actually the envelope. The basket is not N-numbered or registered. So we can actually run the same basket under multiple envelopes. Like I could own 5 envelopes and run that same basket under multiple envelopes. That way you're not having to buy 5 baskets and 5 envelopes. With the actual envelope being N-numbered, there's actually no legal way to install ADS-B the way the rule is written. So a good case in point of this happening recently was down in Albuquerque. They had a handshake deal with all local balloonists that they could just call the tower, get permission to fly into Class Charlie airspace, and no big deal. A new ATC manager took over and said, nope, we're not doing it anymore. You have to have ADS-B. And the balloonists are like, we can't legally have ADS-B because we can't use portable units, and the baskets aren't N-numbered anyway. So, you know, it's kind of a catch-22 there. Luckily, they worked out a deal where they can get a letter of authorization and still have access to fly in that area, but it's a lot more hoops to jump through. But yeah, so we don't really have any kind of transponders or ADS-B. I guess the theory there is we're flying in VFR conditions, visual conditions, on nice days, and if you can't see the big balloon as you're flying, then you maybe shouldn't have your pilot's license.
What kind of investment do you have in balloons?
You know, balloons can vary. It's all over the board, but really a used system like mine, all told, with if you figure your trailer, the balloon, extra fuel tanks, inflation fan, everything, you can actually get started in it for less than 20 grand for a mid-time balloon. So it's in terms of aviation, it's pretty affordable. So Chris, I'm actually going to have you come up here quick. So some of you may recognize this guy. So as I mentioned before, a couple weeks ago, I managed to get Chris up for a flight, and we had a great flight, scared some deer out of some rushes, and we ended up landing in a field, and it was a really long field. There were some bow hunters who were actually out in that marsh where we were scaring the deer away from them. So they came up to us. They were the landowners. I was kind of worried they're going to be angry, but in reality, they just wanted to come check out the balloon, and they said that was the only deer they saw all night anyway, so they were happy with that. But one of those hunters was a young lady, and so we were on the far south end of the field, and we were able to get her in the basket as well as we just kind of contour flew it, which is flying just inches above the ground, up north up along the field to get to the road where our crew vehicles were. So it's kind of cool because we were able to actually give her first experience of floating around in a balloon as well, even if it was at low altitude. So you can see after every flight, we have to get that big balloon in a bag, and there's Chris and that young lady helping me squish that envelope into the bag, and then below that is our post-flight celebration. However, a lot of people know the term aeronaut, but they don't actually know the definition of it. If you look it up on Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it defines an aeronaut as one who operates or travels in an airship or balloon. So Chris, with your balloon flight, you are now officially an aeronaut, and I want to get you this certificate acknowledging you becoming an aeronaut.
Thank you, that's awesome.
So I'll just finish up real quick here. If you want further information, the Balloon Federation of America is a great resource on all aspects of ballooning. The Balloon Training Academy, they have a great ground school for both private and commercial certificates. The FAA Balloon Flying Handbook is a free download from the FAA's website, and you can learn all the information you need to know about ballooning to pass your written tests from there. One of the best sources of information, as I kind of mentioned before, is local balloonists and crew. If you literally see a balloon out there flying around, chase them down, go talk to them, help them pack up, because two things balloon pilots love is help packing up and talking about balloons. You can also always reach out to us via email or on our Facebook page. So thank you all. I hope you had a great night, and I'll stick around here for a little bit, and you can come up and talk and ask any questions about balloons or aviation in general. Like I said, I'm an aviation nerd, so anything flying I like to talk about. You can ask my wife.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. A round of applause, everybody, for Mike. So we were going to give you a set of chalks, but nothing you can do with those. So we gave you a plaque instead, something you can at least tack onto the wall.
Nice.
We gave a set of chalks to the Goodyear Blimp guys, and they complained that they couldn't use it. So, so here you are, Mike. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Having a flight with you was amazing. I will say that I think we startled a golden retriever who thought we were the biggest ball in the world going by, but again, thank you guys. Thanks for coming. Come on up, by all means, talk to Mike, ask any questions you have, and have a great Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays, and we'll see you in January when we start the speaker series back. So thank you guys as always for coming. Have a good night. Thank you.